Presidential race already chaotic, that much we know, but believe it or not, it could actually even get more complicated. That's because former New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg just said in an interview what many of us suspected he may be feeling, that he's legitimately considering a run for the White House. And here to talk about that is Philip Bump, political reporter for The Fix at The Washington Post. Philip, thanks for a few. I appreciate it.
Of course.
Yeah, I love the quote when announcing his interest potentially in a presidential run. I find the level of discourse and discussion distressingly banal. Probably, as you said in your piece, the first time Trump's been called that. He's called a lot of other things. But seriously, for a race that's gone from the questionable to the crude, does Bloomberg really fit into this? Given there's this kind of give the people what they want mentality going on?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I mean, it's not really clear what Michael Bloomberg's thinking beyond that a race between Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump would be so unusual that there might be space for an independent candidate. He's talked about this before. He's never actually run. So, the odds are good that he won't run this time. Of course, we said that about Trump last year as well. But yeah, I mean, the question is, what does Michael Bloomberg bring to the table for voters that wouldn't be captured by one of the two parties? And it's really not clear what his unique value proposition is.
Right, because he wouldn't be theoretically the only billionaire, but he did kind of lay out the caveats necessary for him to get in, that it would have to be Trump or Cruz on the Republican side and Bernie Sanders on the other. Now, just because he always has seemed to be about setting his own rules here, and he'd have to decide this in a month, theoretically, maybe even before Super Tuesday's even done. Right. Do you get the sense that that's kind of what he'd want? But if he believes at the end of the day he's electable no matter what, he's going to get in regardless?
My suspicion is that if he really, really thinks that he can win this thing, he'd run. Because why wouldn't you? He's got more money than God. He can do whatever he wants to do. Why not run for president if he really legitimately thinks he can run? It's not clear that that will ever be the case. Even in a Bernie Sanders, Donald Trump, Michael Bloomberg matchup, there's polling that was done recently that showed him coming in third, not even a close third, a distant third. Granted, we're very early. Half of America doesn't even know who Michael Bloomberg is, which is also fairly shocking. But we're talking about a process by which the Democrats have all voted for Bernie Sanders, the Republicans have all voted for Donald Trump by the point that we get to the stage where Bloomberg would throw his hat into the ring. And so Democrats are already committed and Republicans are already committed. And so he's talking about a middle ground, which is very close to who he is and the life that he lives. Like, that's a lot of his friends and the people he interacts with, I'm sure. But I'm not sure it's in a lot of Americans.
To that end, you said it before, that Q poll that showed that half America doesn't even know who he is. Maybe it's because in New York we think there was, the world basically revolves around the metropolitan area. That said, though, is that a good or a bad thing in today's day and age?
It depends on what you're trying to do, right? If Michael Bloomberg wants to retire to a life of anonymity, it's a good thing. I don't think that's what Michael Bloomberg wants to do pretty clearly, right? This is very early in the process. If Michael Bloomberg were actually going to throw his hat into the ring, obviously more people would become aware of who he is. Most people prior to 1992 had never heard of Ross Perot in their lives, and eventually he ended up getting a decent proportion of the vote, by some arguments actually handing the election to Bill Clinton. So it's definitely the case that Michael Bloomberg would be better known. It's definitely the case that Michael Bloomberg could be something of a spoiler. It's very, very early to be able to determine what that looks like. But there's we're talking about an election where there's a very passionate group of Democrats who are very focused on income inequality and want Bernie Sanders, a very passionate group of Republicans very focused on immigration who want Donald Trump. It's not clear where the passion lies that Michael Bloomberg will be able to seize.
Okay, I'm going to ask you a completely unfair question, Phil, because who the heck knows? As you said, he's got more money than God, estimated somewhere in the neighborhood of $40 billion, and it's real money, maybe not like Trump's. If he really put his money where his mouth is, and there's no reason to think he wouldn't, what does $1 billion, $1.5 billion buy you if you're going to be spending it really hand over fist sometime between March and November?
It buys you a political campaign, right? I mean, if you look at what people spent in 2008, 2012, it was on the order of $1 billion or so per campaign. Then you work in a lot of external money as well, which I don't think Bloomberg would have. But we're not talking about as a percentage of what he has. It's not a large percentage of the actual amount of money that he has. In contrast to Donald Trump, who has a lot of his value is tied up in buildings and things which he would have to sell. He doesn't have a lot of liquid assets. My sense is that Michael Bloomberg's fortune is very different and gives him more space. I mean, if he threw $5 billion into it, it would be the most expensive campaign by order of magnitude, essentially, over what had been done in the past. And for him, that's, 1/10 of what he's got.
as you said, he would be or try to appeal as the sensible grown-up, forgetting for a moment if that's what America even wants now. If he did make that compelling argument, where would he pull more people from, Democrats or Republicans?
Polling suggests he'd probably pull more from Democrats, in part because what we're looking at is a mayor of New York City who is, there are a lot of things about him which, while he ran as a Republican in New York City, everyone who has spent any time in New York City knows that New York Republicans are not like, say, Alabama Republicans. So his tendencies tend to be more liberal. The things that he's really put his foot down on are things like gun control and climate change, which play very far to the left on the political spectrum. And so it would be hard for me to see him actually appealing to a lot of folks beyond this cadre of Republicans, moderate Republicans, who are very annoyed by the presence of Donald Trump, the establishment Republicans who are not willing to fall in line. He'd pick some of them up, too. Clearly what we're seeing over the course of this campaign, though, is that that's not much of the Republican Party. If it were, then Donald Trump wouldn't be winning.
We certainly know from anyone close and not even close to Bloomberg, this is something that he's wanted for a long time. He may just see a pathway, real or not, that could get him there. We will find out, as you said, probably within the next month. Phil, I certainly appreciate a couple from you. Thank you so much.
Of course, my pleasure.
All right, coming up next, a break from politics. More wintry weather is hitting us here, but what about in New Hampshire? We're going to take a look at the impact of the storms, not just in the primary area, but also in our neck of the woods as well. Meteorologist Jamie Booth, join us next.